Hello everyone, I'm Hibiscus Stitch, and I'm currently remaking one of my old Stitch and Dish videos with some better information and this time some visual aids. I'm going to be doing this with a lot of my older videos now that I have better editing skills, and also be doing it with new topics. And if you have any topics you'd like to see me address in this type of format, please let me know down below. So without further ado, let's get into my worst convention experience ever. My first furry convention was Anthragon 2017, and I did not really know what I was doing. I had no idea what furries were interested in. I was more an anime convention type seller at that point in time, so it was really interesting to see what worked and what didn't. So I was always looking forward to doing another furry con to try and give it a try. So that way I could start doing more furry conventions. So when I heard about ACE, Anthro Crossroads East, I was really excited. Especially since it was local. It was something that I could commute to and not have to have the hotel cost. It was run by one of the biggest furry groups in the state. They had done previous meetups, a pretty good history, and I was really looking forward to see what they could do with a convention. So I get there on day 0, and I go to pick up my badges, and when I get to registration, they had my badge, but not my husband. So when I was asking about it, they said, oh, we didn't even charge you, which, inconvenient, but that's totally fine. So I was asking if I could pay them then. I had the cash right there. And it was a big stink. They didn't know what to do. They kept trying to get me to move along to make room for paying customers. And I held up the $60 and said, hey, I literally have the money right here. I want to buy his badge. And then finally, they allowed me to buy the badge. Not the best start, but it was a first year convention, so I expected a little bit of weirdness, so it was totally fine. So I go ahead and I get set up, and my booth looks like this. Not the best booth ever. I was still trying to figure out what furries liked. This was the first time that I was offering tails and ear headbands and things like that to furries, so I wasn't 100% sure how it would work out. So as you can see, I had a lot of weird experimental things. I had a lot of props. I had a lot of bell collars and things like that. It was more just me trying to figure out what furries would want. And as you can tell by that Tide Pod plush right there, it kind of dates when the booth was. So overall, the amount of money made that weekend isn't one of my complaints at all. It was a fair amount for the work that I had put into it. Interesting side note before we get into some of the more nitty-gritty things is that in the bathroom, they had like a TV in the mirror, and it would play ads, which is really weird. That's nothing on the convention, that's what the hotel. But it's like, while you went to go wash your hands, all of a sudden you were watching an ad. It was just a really strange thing. I will start with some of the positives I experienced at the convention. The food truck variety was great. They did have a food truck on Friday, which was a little disappointing, but luckily there was a mall very close by, so we were able to pick up something from there. But Saturday and Sunday, they had some really interesting and awesome food trucks, some great variety, things you don't normally see. Like, it wasn't your standard hamburger, hot dog, and fries, but it was very interesting, so that was a very good positive. The table was a very low cost, and my badge was included with it, but not my husband's, but it was pretty much comparative either way. And it only took a few sales to make all of our costs back. And another positive was that the con was right next to a big mall, so there was lots of things to do outside of the con. I know I got there a little early one day, so I ran into Barnes & Noble to pick up a comic that had came out that day. And a lot of the attendees got to go over there during downtime and either get some cheap food at the food court or just run around and have some fun. Also, Walmart was just down the road, so if anyone needed something really quick, it was like a 5 to 10 minute drive depending on traffic. So very good location. That's pretty much where the good things end for me as a dealer. Everything that I'm talking about is coming from a dealer perspective. Let's get into the first con. The hours that the dealers were open was on the information packet that they sent us. Then when we get to the convention, what the con had posted was entirely different. So my husband went to go ask, hey, when does the dealers close? And he took my phone with him so that way he could show what our information packet showed, because it was closing time and we still weren't closed. The two guys at the information desk had no idea. They just kind of laughed and said, oh, we don't know. And my husband says, well, we're dealers and we would kind of like a time because we're getting hungry and we just want to know when our stuff is going to be locked up. And then one of the guys said, midnight, and then he laughed. He said, conventions, right? And my husband's like, no, not the convention itself. When does the dealers close? And then a third guy finally came over when he was hearing the fuss. The guy that has been trying to talk to him about the closing time then makes a very frustrated hand gesture at him and says, "What do you want from me?" And my husband was just shocked because it was extremely rude. And he says, "I just want to know when the dealers was closing to the public since our information packet was wrong." So then the guy said affirm 8, and 8 to 9 would be when the dealer's room would be open to just the dealers for us to close up. That is not how you handle someone asking you a question. It was just very rude and very unprofessional. And this pretty much happened throughout the rest of the convention, where no one knew when things were happening. Because of this, the dealer's room was not really locked up to just only dealers when it said it would be. I always wrap my booth in a plastic tablecloth because whenever someone is trying to steal something, generally they're looking for a quick grab and go. So I tried to eliminate those grab and go possibilities. I know someone in the dealer's hall, the person next to me, had a little bowl of stickers and patches, and they had stuff stolen from them because of the lack of keeping non-dealers out of the room. We even have special badges that said dealers. They were different from the attendee badges, so there wasn't really much of an excuse to not allow those non-dealers into the room. I know when we got there Saturday morning, there was non-dealers already looking at all the tables, and when we asked the guy about it, we just got the same kind of shrug and laugh, which became a quite familiar response that whole weekend. Pretty much every day, no one knew when things were closing and when things were opening. Luckily, with the addition of food trucks, it was a little easier because we didn't need to wait until the dealers closed to be able to go out and get food, but it was still very annoying and very frustrating. At one point, the person that was in charge of the dealer's room was asleep in front of the dealer's room, which is why people were able to enter the doors that weren't supposed to be in there, and it was just frustrating. There was also no signage outside of the dealer's room to communicate that the dealer's room was there or what hours it was open as well, so the same miscommunication was also going on with the attendees. And because of this, there was an artist alley right outside of the door, which was not very well communicated either. I think the whole weekend only 2 people were in the artist alley. So a lot of people thought that was the dealer's room and didn't enter into our room. Where the dealers were located was originally supposed to be the game room, and we were supposed to be in the bigger room in the corner. But sometime between the start of the convention and when they communicated this to us, they switched it. So we were now in the smaller gaming room. Here's what the original setup looked like if they had kept us in the game room. This is what they had sent us in the information packet. And the dealers were absolutely cramped in that room. We were packed in like sardines, and because of this, because of the close quarters, it was really hot in the dealer's room, which at a furry convention isn't ideal because the fursuiters get really hot in their fursuits. So they're not going to want to really come into this steaming hot room. The first day in that room was awful. It was so hot. Whenever we got a small break outside, it was just wonderful. I will never take EC for granted again. The second day and the third day, luckily the person next to me brought a fan and they had it going, so we had some airflow, but it was still really hot in there. Also, because we were now in this new smaller space, 2 of the tables were pretty much hidden behind other tables because there was no good way to get all of us to fit into this very tiny space. One person was entirely behind the door, so no one even went over to them because no one could see them. The tables were also so close to the wall that it was really painful to be in there. Whenever we had to try and get out to go to the bathroom, if you couldn't crawl under your table, you had to make the entire row of people leave and then try your best not to bump into anything. It was cramped. Now, usually when you have a dealer's room, you close it during closing ceremonies, so that way some of the dealers can go see that if they want to. And also, you know it's going to be a low traffic time because that's where everyone is going to be going. They're going to be going to see the closing ceremonies, so that's when you close your dealer's room. But this one stayed open not only during the guest of honors panel, but also during closing ceremonies. Like, the dealer's hall ended when the closing ceremonies ended, and of course everyone was over at closing ceremonies. So for about 2 hours, we were just kind of sitting there twiddling our fingers because no one was there. Everyone pretty much started packing up during that time. I tried to stay to help make a good impression because some dealers' rooms don't like it when you leave early. But after like over an hour of no one, I also packed up early and went ahead and left. I also wasn't planning on coming back to the convention, so. There was a bit of drama with one of the artists and the staff where they were making an alternate logo for the convention that encompassed like the North Carolina state, and they did not like that. They complained very loudly about this artist. Instead of pulling them aside and talking to them quietly about it and asking them to pull it, they pretty much were passive aggressive about it, talking loudly about it. They eventually confronted them on the second day very loudly in the dealer's room. And outside of the dealer's room, I would catch the con staff often talking about it and talking about how they didn't want to get lawyers involved. It just felt like this was something that they should have kept to themselves and not have made so public. I know on Saturday night, and as I was going to the bathroom, there was someone crying about it, and the other person was consoling them and calling that artist a hater, and it just was really unprofessional. When things like that happen, you really need to go about it a professional way where you talk to and confront that person one-on-one, and then you keep it to the staff room. I'm sure it was really annoying to them and they didn't appreciate it, but you don't need to be talking about it so loudly to attendees. It just came off wrong to me. On the last day I was doing Sunday sales. The few tails that I had left, I was selling for $10 each. So one of the con staff comes over, he picks up one of my tails and he says, "Hey, how much is this?" So I told him that it was $10. He then dropped the tail from where he was standing. It bounced off the table and rolled on the floor. And then he just turned around and marched right outside. I was kind of shocked that this staff member didn't at least help pick up the merchandise. It was just really not ideal. Overall, things were just extremely disorganized, and any sort of help that us dealers got was when we all banded together to confront them about basic needs. The disorganization was just really apparent in all aspects of this convention. I was hoping that they would be able to learn from this, but after one more year of running a convention that ended up being a lot smaller, they decided to just close up and not host anymore, which was probably for the best, honestly. Disparage the hard work that they did, but the disorganization and the rudeness that we experienced on top of some very uncomfortable conditions in the dealer's room itself just made this one of my worst overall convention experiences. But on the positive side, I did make enough money to cover all my costs and to make some profits for bills. And I did learn a lot about what furries like. I talked to a lot of different furries at this convention to ask them about things that they would like to see from a plush maker, and I learned a lot. The next furry convention that I would do would be a lot better. So this was just a learning experience all around, and one that I am grateful that I did do. One of the best things that happened at this convention was that someone purchased one of my little meat steaks from me that I made as a fursuit prop, and they liked it so much that they actually asked me to sign the plushie. And that's the only time I've ever been asked to do that, so it made me feel like a little bit of a rock star, and I really appreciated that experience. The attendees themselves were all awesome. Everyone was super nice. Everyone was super appreciative of the things that we were selling, and it was just a great overall experience with the attendees. If the convention had just been more organized and there had been a little bit more professionalism and the signage had been clearer and they didn't try to cram us into a very tiny room, this convention might still be going today. It was just a combination of factors as well as good old furry drama that made this convention shutter after 2 years. Hopefully this video was entertaining to you, and maybe hopefully you learned a few things as well. If you have any topics you'd like to see me cover, just let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and take care everyone.